Dear Seeker, welcome to this sacred moment of reflection. Today, we explore a profound teaching from the heart of Buddhism, the three poisons, also known as the three unwholesome roots. These teachings come directly from the Buddha's earliest discourses, preserved in the Pali Canon, the Dhammapada, and echoed throughout Mahayana texts such as the Lotus Sutra and the Heart Sutra. For thousands of years, they have served as a map for understanding the human mind and the nature of suffering. The Buddha taught that the causes of unhappiness do not lie outside of us. They are not hidden in other people, in circumstances, in fate, or in the world. Instead, they arise from deep patterns within the mind, patterns we are often unaware of. These patterns are called the three poisons: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. They are called poisons not to frighten us, but to help us see clearly what quietly disrupts our peace. These poisons shape our thoughts, our emotions, our relationships, and the way we experience life itself. They cloud our perception, confuse our wisdom, and bind us to cycles of dissatisfaction. But here is the beautiful truth. Once we understand these poisons, they begin to lose their power. Awareness itself is the antidote. Understanding is the beginning of healing. This teaching is not about judging yourself or forcing change. The Buddha's path is gentle, compassionate, and rooted in curiosity, not harshness. When we look within with kindness and patience, we start to notice these poisons without fear. We begin to see how they arise, how they influence us, and how we can transform them into wisdom, love, and clarity. So today, dear friend, let us walk together through these teachings. May this exploration help you uncover the radiant happiness that already lives within you, untouched, unbroken, and waiting to be rediscovered. Understanding the first poison, ignorance, avidi. Ignorance, called avidi in Sanskrit and avij in Pali, is considered the root of all suffering in Buddhist philosophy. But ignorance here does not mean lack of intelligence or education. It means a fundamental misunderstanding of reality, not seeing things as they truly are. The Buddha described this in texts such as the Samyutta Nikaya and the Majjhima Nikaya, explaining that ignorance is the darkness that prevents us from recognizing the Four Noble Truths. At its core, ignorance blinds us to three simple yet profound truths. Everything is impermanent, anicca. Nothing has a fixed, independent self, anatta. Clinging leads to suffering, dukkha. Because we don't intuitively see these truths, we wander through life believing that emotions, possessions, relationships, situations, and even identities will stay the way we want them to. This illusion sets us up for disappointment, anxiety, and conflict. Ignorance also hides our inner nature, our wisdom, compassion, and peace. It tricks us into thinking we are separate from others, creating division and misunderstanding. Ancient commentaries like Buddhaghosa's Visuddhimagga emphasize that ignorance acts like a fog around the mind, blurring our ability to perceive clearly. But the Buddha's teaching is not one of blame, it is one of awakening. Ignorance is simply a state of not yet knowing. The moment we begin observing our thoughts, patterns, and reactions with awareness, the fog starts to thin. Every mindful breath, every moment of stillness, and every insight gained through meditation brings light into the darkness. The antidote to this poison is wisdom, prajan. Wisdom is cultivated through gentle inquiry, meditation, reflection on teachings, and compassionate actions. Over time, wisdom replaces confusion with clarity, fear with understanding, and restlessness with inner calm. Recognizing ignorance is the first step on the path to freedom, and it is a step filled with hope. The second poison, attachment, raga or lobha. Attachment, known as raga in Sanskrit and lobha in Pali, is the second poison, and it forms one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior. In teachings such as the Dhammapada, the Buddha explains that attachment arises when the mind clings to what it finds pleasant, comforting, familiar, or fulfilling. This can be objects, people, outcomes, identities, emotions, or even spiritual experiences. At first glance, attachment may seem harmless. After all, we naturally care about the things and people in our lives. But the Buddha differentiates between loving connection and clinging desire. Love is open-handed and free. Attachment is grasping and fearful. Love allows. Attachment demands. The poison of attachment works subtly. It whispers that happiness depends on getting what we want and keeping it forever. But because everything is impermanent, attachment continually sets us up for tension, worry, and disappointment. The Samyutta Nikaya describes this as binding oneself with craving's chain, where the mind becomes ensnared by the desire for pleasure, security, and identity. Attachment also narrows our perspective. When we cling, we are no longer present. We project into the future or grasp at the past. We may become possessive in relationships, anxious about our goals, or unhappy when things don't unfold as expected. Over time, this clinging exhausts the heart. Yet, the Buddha does not ask us to reject life or suppress desire. Instead, he teaches us to cultivate non-attachment, a spacious state of engagement without grasping. As texts like the Heart Sutra and modern interpretations by teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh explain, non-attachment is a balanced way of being, fully appreciating life while understanding that nothing can be held permanently. The antidote to attachment is generosity, dna, and mindful appreciation. When we appreciate rather than cling, we transform desire into gratitude. When we practice giving, even in small ways, the tightness of attachment loosens. Through awareness and gentle practice, attachment fades into freedom. Aversion, called dvi in Sanskrit and dosa in Pali, is the third poison and is the mirror opposite of attachment. While attachment pulls us toward what we desire, aversion pushes us away from what we fear, dislike, or refuse to accept. In the Buddha's teachings, especially in the Abhidhamma and the Dhammapada, aversion is described as the mental fire that burns the one who holds it. Aversion appears in many forms. Times irritation, times anger, times resentment, times judgment, times avoidance, times rejection, times the need to control, times emotional withdrawal, times fear of discomfort. Even subtle forms count, like silently disliking someone, wishing a situation were different, or feeling triggered by small frustrations. Whether loud or quiet, aversion contracts the heart. The Buddha often used a powerful metaphor. Holding aversion is like grasping a hot coal, intending to throw it at another. It is you who gets burned first. This means the pain of anger doesn't begin when we express it. It begins the moment it arises in the mind. Aversion is rooted in the inability to accept reality as it is. When something challenges our comfort, beliefs, or sense of identity, the mind reacts by pushing it away. This resistance creates inner tension, mental conflict, and emotional storms. Texts such as the Metta Sutta emphasize that aversion blinds us to compassion and blurs our understanding of others. Yet, like all poisons, aversion can be transformed. Its antidotes are loving kindness, metta, and patience, kanti. Loving kindness softens the heart, creating space where understanding can grow. Patience teaches us to stay with discomfort without collapsing into reaction. Practices such as mindful breathing, compassion meditation, and self-inquiry gradually dissolve the heat of anger. When we meet painful experiences with presence instead of resistance, aversion loses its grip, revealing clarity, forgiveness, and inner strength. Through awareness, tenderness, and courage, the fire of aversion becomes the light of compassion. How the three poisons. To truly understand the Buddha's teachings, we must see that the three poisons, ignorance, attachment, and aversion, do not function independently. They weave together like threads in a single knot, each reinforcing and strengthening the others. Ancient Buddhist psychology, especially the Abhidharma and commentaries like the Path of Purification, describe this interplay as the engine behind samsara, the ongoing cycle of suffering and dissatisfaction. Ignorance is the starting point. When we fail to see reality clearly, we cling to illusions. The illusion of permanence, the illusion of a separate self, the illusion that lasting happiness can be obtained from external conditions. This blindness gives rise to the other two poisons. From ignorance emerges attachment. Because we misunderstand the nature of life, we chase after people, sensations, achievements, and possessions, believing they can secure our happiness. We become entangled in craving, fear of loss, and constant seeking. Attachment binds the mind, creating tension and restlessness. Where attachment exists, aversion inevitably follows. The moment something threatens our desires or challenges our beliefs, we resist it. We push away discomfort, reject uncertainty, and react with irritation, anger, or fear. In this way, aversion grows from the same root as desire, the belief that our happiness depends on controlling life. This cycle, ignorance, attachment, aversion, spins continuously. It forms habits, shapes our emotional patterns, influences our relationships, and even constructs our identity. Over time, these poisons create what the Buddha called mental formations, filters through which we interpret every experience. But there is hope. The moment we become aware of this cycle, transformation begins. Through practices such as mindfulness, right view, and compassion, we gradually weaken the poisons. Awareness interrupts the cycle, allowing wisdom to arise where confusion once lived. In seeing the poisons clearly, we begin to reclaim the freedom that has always been ours. Shape your mind. Practical ways to purify the poisons. The Buddha often emphasized that transformation is not achieved through force but through gentle awareness. The three poisons, ignorance, attachment, and aversion, can indeed be powerful, but they are not permanent. They arise from conditions, and therefore, they can also be dissolved through new conditions. This section focuses on practical, compassionate steps drawn from classical Buddhist practice, modern mindfulness, and the lived experience of generations of seekers. 1. Meditation, Vipassana, insight practice. The Buddha described mindfulness as the direct path to purification. Through observing the breath, sensations, and thoughts, we begin to see how the poisons arise. Meditation teaches us to watch without grasping or pushing away, dissolving attachment and aversion at their root. 2. Mindful breathing and presence. A single conscious breath interrupts the momentum of craving, anger, and confusion. This simple practice restores clarity and breaks the automatic patterns that feed the poisons. 3. Cultivating loving kindness, metta. Aversion softens when met with compassion. By silently repeating phrases like, "May I be well," "May others be well," the heart becomes more spacious. The Metta Sutta teaches that loving kindness is the most powerful antidote to anger and resentment. 4. Practicing generosity, dna. Giving, whether time, attention, or kindness, loosens the grip of attachment. Generosity turns the mind outward, helping us see abundance instead of lack. 5. Contemplating impermanence, anicca. Reflecting on the ever-changing nature of life counters ignorance. When we understand that nothing stays the same, grasping and resisting lose their intensity. 6. Ethical living, La, right speech, right action, and right livelihood naturally weaken the poisons. Ethical behavior purifies the mind, creating harmony within oneself and with others. 7. Letting go of fixed identity. Seeing that the self is fluid and ever-changing reduces ego-based clinging. Freedom grows when we no longer trap ourselves in rigid stories. Through these gentle practices, the poisons gradually transform into wisdom, compassion, and inner peace. Why this understanding leads to liberation. Understanding the three poisons is not merely an intellectual exercise, it is the heart of the Buddha's path to liberation. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not from life itself, but from the way the mind reacts to life. When ignorance clouds our vision, when attachment pulls us toward what we want, and when aversion pushes us away from what we dislike, we become trapped in a cycle of stress, fear, disappointment, and restlessness. Liberation arises when we see these patterns clearly. 1. Seeing the root causes ends the cycle. As long as we only address symptoms, stress, conflict, dissatisfaction, we never reach the core. But when we identify the poisons beneath our reactions, we finally understand why suffering repeats. This insight alone begins to dismantle the cycle, like turning on a light in a dark room. 2. Awareness breaks automatic habit loops. The moment we recognize this is craving or this is aversion, we create space between the feeling and the reaction. In that space lies freedom, the ability to respond rather than react. The Buddha described this awareness as the path of brightening. 3. We begin to experience life as it really is. Ignorance distorts reality. When ignorance fades, we see impermanence, interconnection, and the non-self nature of experience. Life feels lighter because we no longer cling to what cannot stay or resist what cannot be avoided. 4. The mind naturally becomes peaceful. When the poisons weaken, the qualities that were always buried beneath them begin to shine through: compassion, patience, clarity, and joy. Liberation does not require adding anything new. It's an uncovering of what was already there. 5. Freedom becomes a lived experience. Liberation isn't abstract. It shows up in daily life, in how we move through conflict, how we let go of worry, how we stop taking everything personally. We become steady, open, and unshakably grounded. This understanding transforms not just the mind, but the entire quality of our life. As we come to the end of this exploration into Buddha's three poisons, I invite you to take a quiet breath and let the teachings settle gently into your awareness. The Buddha never intended his wisdom to be overwhelming or philosophical for its own sake. Instead, he offered these teachings as simple tools, practical insights that ordinary people can apply in the middle of their daily joys and struggles. If you've made it this far, it means there is a sincere seeker within you, someone who is ready to look deeper and walk toward a more conscious, peaceful life. The three poisons, ignorance, attachment, and aversion, are not enemies to fight. They are patterns to understand. When you shine the light of awareness upon them, they lose their power. And in that space of clarity, your natural wisdom begins to guide you effortlessly, just as the Buddha described. As you continue your journey, remember, transformation begins in small moments. When you pause before reacting, when you notice a craving without immediately following it, when you soften instead of pushing something away, these little shifts dissolve the poisons drop by drop. Over time, they create profound change. If these teachings resonate with you, consider exploring the texts that have guided seekers for centuries: the Dhammapada, the Satipatthana Sutta, the Fire Sermon, and modern commentaries like Thich Nhat Hanh, The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, or Bhikkhu Bodhi's works. Each one deepens the insight we touched on today. Thank you for sharing your time and presence. May the clarity you found here continue to grow, and may your path always lead you closer to peace, wisdom, and genuine happiness. If this video brought you value, feel free to like, share, or subscribe so we can continue walking this path of knowledge together. Until next time, may you be well, may you be free, and may you be at peace. Hub, humanize 317 words.